Welcome to Historical Quarrels. Today, we are going to be doing something a bit different. And instead of a war or petty feud between people, we are going to examine the historical quarrel of an ancient board game. We will journey back to the courts of ancient China to a game that captivated emperors and scholars alike. This is not just any game. It's a game shrouded in legend and steeped in mystery. So, in this episode, we're delving into the enigmatic world of Liubo. Picture this. It's the Han Dynasty, over 2,000 years ago. In the imperial palace, amidst the hustle and bustle of court life, a game is unfolding. This isn't just for entertainment, it's a display of strategy, intellect, and perhaps a touch of the mystical. Liubo, as it's known, is more than a mere pastime. It's a reflection of life. A dance of fate and cleverness, a game so captivating that it's said an emperor once nearly lost his palace to flames while engrossed in its play. But what was Liubo? How was it played? Why did it vanish, leaving behind only fragments of its rules and its rich legacy? Join us as we explore tombs, sift through ancient texts, and piece together the puzzle of this almost forgotten game. So, grab your tea and settle in as we embark on a journey through time, unraveling the secrets of Liubo, the lost game of ancient China. This is Historical Quarrels. Let the game begin. Hey everyone, welcome back to Historical Quarrels. I'm your host, Tyler Eckhart. Today's episode, if you can tell by from the opening, is very different from the usual here. Though, to be fair, defining normal for this show is like trying to describe an Adamic god's alignment in D&D. Because if you go from the Christian viewpoint of a loving God, sure, maybe it's lawful good. But if you take a much more secular look at the Adamic God, kind of read the Old Testament a little bit more with like a bit of scrutiny or like from a moralist standpoint, that deity is clearly chaotic neutral, or evil, honestly, based off of the whole worship me and no one else or die attitude. That and the whole I'll kill kids if, people aren't obeying me. Stuff like that. But so normal for the show's difficult. And if I lost you there, I'm sorry. I've just been playing a ton of Baldur's Gate 3 with my wife and have gotten really into D&D again. Well, I guess I shouldn't say again. I've always been into D&D, but it's been extra on my mind because of doing that. Point is, though, the show doesn't really have a normal, probably won't. That being said, today's episode is kind of like a test run, honestly, for a potential separate show or just this show continuing on that I want to do in the future, which is really just all about ancient board games. It combines my passions of history and board games. I love board games. And the game of Liubo is a very famous ancient board game I'm sure many of you have not heard about, despite it being famous. It's just not, I don't know. I feel like it's not talked about. These type of things aren't generally talked about. So, and I definitely didn't know enough about this until I started researching it more today. Not today, but researching it more. So, listen, I understand this is not going to be for everyone, but I really love board games. So get ready for today's historical quarrel. You are listening to Historical Quarrels. So let's go ahead and start with the simplest question. What is Liubo? Liubo is an ancient Chinese board game steeped in mystery and historical significance. While the exact rules of the game have been lost to time, kind of, archaeological discoveries and historical texts provide us with glimpses into its nature and the role it played in ancient Chinese society. It is believed to have originated in China, possibly early as the second millennium BCE, which is that's pretty goddamn old, man. Almost as old as the oldest board game known to man, but that's besides the point. It was widely popular during the Zhou and Han dynasties, and I am not exaggerating when I say this game was more popular than hating or loving Confucianism during that time as well. And if you know anything about that time period of ancient China, you know how ingrained Confucianism was into the fabric of society. And so this game was as well. So what type of game was Liubo? Well, most historians have considered it to be a race game, by their standards. And a race game is a large category of board games in which the object is to be the first to move all of one's pieces to the end of a track, essentially. Think Chutes and Ladders, or like, you start from 0 and you try to get all the way to the end. Or I guess Mancala would be like another one where you kind of just move your stones and you try to go around a whole track, which is Mancala is kind of like the world game of Race games they have an objective where you move pieces around to a board to get to like a finish. Or, another good one would be Sorry. And honestly, Liubo kind of plays almost like Sorry, interestingly enough. And we'll kind of get into that a little more. But this is both the earliest type of board game known, with implements and representations dating back to at least the 3rd millennium BC in Egypt, Iraq, and Iran, and also the most widely dispersed. Here's a quote that I found: "All cultures that have games at all have race games." This is basically what they found. Race games often use dice to decide game options and how far to move pieces. So the reason for Liubo to be considered one of its primary aspects of gameplay is to get your stones to move around a track and be the first one to do it enough to get 6 points. However, it's a bit more complex than that. You move around a track, but then you can also capture opponent's pieces. The stones are like represent birds, and they're trying to get fish and trying to bring the fish back to their nest. It's we'll get into it more, but let me kind of keep describing this. Let me go over the history of this more. But race games were the main rage back in the day before social deduction games were invented, so humans' morbid curiosity to know whether or not they could manipulate their friends and get away with murder, were invented. Games like Werewolf or Secret Hitler let you do that for the most part. So for most people back then, that was a cruel reality rather than a fun pastime, and they had to face it daily. So they had a range of race games that would keep them distracted from everyday real-world horrors and potential psychotic murderous friends that weren't going to get caught murdering people due to the lack of technology and blaming deaths on magical beings. Or the very real horror of William Bradford, who back then was known as Shi Wei, who would roam ancient China streets, sucking the blood of anyone who challenged him to a game of and sacrifices he shall have. And for those of you confused about that derailer, I'm referencing the America's Origins episode. So if you want to get it, go listen to that to gain context. The variation of race games are simple. There's simple race games, complex race games, multiplex race games, and strategic race games. Simple race games were primarily based on luck, where each player has one piece to move, so the outcome of the game is really up to the dice gods. Think games like Chutes and Ladders, or the Game of Life, where you don't really have to think, you just roll dice or spin a wheel, and you move your piece along the board, and things happen based off of your roll or spin. Complex race games combine some sense of strategy and chance, but still heavily rely on chance to determine the outcome of the game. Some examples of games like that are Sorry or Parcheesi. Strategic race games completely eliminate chance and are pure strategy games. The best example of this is chess, where you don't roll any dice, and the result is purely based off of your skill and understanding of the game. So I feel like adding a bit of chance to chess would be kind of fun. Idea for later. This brings us to multiplex race games, which prioritize the role of strategy in the game, but still have an element of chance in it. However, the element of chance is really just determines which strategy you need to choose when moving your pieces. This is the category that Liubo falls into. So, what did Liubo look like? Well, as this show is a podcast and not primarily in the video medium, I've done my best to write out a description of the game. For those of you on YouTube or Patreon, I'm adding some images and gameplay thanks to Liubo Lab, which I'll have the link in the description of the video. With a quick game I was able to play for today to show what the game looked like for this part. The bow board was typically a square made out of stone, wood, or whatever material the owner of the game wished to be made with. It had a pattern of 12 squares arranged symmetrically. The center of the board had distinctive areas often referred to as the sky, and earth, or river, if the rules found at the tomb of the Marquises are correct. Each player had 6 stone square pieces. The pieces were often differentiated by color or design. So for this, I just want you guys to picture the game of Go's black and white stones, but square and a little bit bigger. Kind of more like a domino-looking type stone. And this is typically how Liubo's pieces were designed as well. Now, the game may have used two 6-sided dice at some point, which determined the movement of the pieces on the board. But to start the game, they typically threw sticks at each other to determine who went first, and how many steps along the board's path you could go. The way you won the initial stick toss was whoever inflicted the most damage on their opponent. This led to archaeologists to discover sharper and more spear-like sticks adjacent to Liubo boards that were developed in later generations, suggesting that as the competitive Liubo gaming scene evolved, so did the strategy players would employ. Meaning the best way to min-max and win was to have the sharpest stick, suggesting that killing your opponent turn 1 was the optimal play if you were able to. This may be one of the reasons the game would dwindle down over time, as it was so popular in parts of China that they were starting to lose more than a third of its population in specific kingdoms due to these spears being thrown at the start of each game played. Which is what would lead to the invention of Weiqi, or Chinese Go, or Chinese chess, which did not involve the sticks or dice. And to determine who went first was just simply who was ever playing the black stones, or white with the chess pieces, which is much more boring. But if you ask me, it's much safer. So I mean, obviously the spear throwing was just a bunch of BS. I just spat it out because I figured adding in some good old-fashioned violence this early on was necessary for some people, including me. And just picturing a game essentially wiping out a third of a kingdom's population because it was so popular and you had to kill your opponent turn 1 if you wanted to be good at it was hilarious to me. So here's the educated actual answer as to how to start and what may or may not be the true way to play the game. And I say that because, again, the exact rules of the game are not known. And some of the surviving descriptions of the game are conflicting, which suggests that the game may have been played according to different rules at different times or in different places. Like in one era, the game of Liubo was played this way. In another era, it was played another way. Kind of like Monopoly. When you're playing Monopoly at your friend's house, there's some house rules that they have, but then when you go play at your other friend's house, they disregard the house rules and they're kind of more by the book. And then when you go somewhere else, there's like some extra rules that are added, or there's like editions of Monopoly where things are different. That was what was going on here with Liubo, and the reason why everything's confusing. So the most complete description of Liubo occurs in the quotation from the Lost Book of Ancient Bo, in a commentary by Zhang Zhan to the book of Lizhi that was written during the Jin Dynasty. The quote here is, method of play. 2 people sit facing each other over a board, and the board is divided into 12 paths with 2 ends and an area called the water in the middle, or river. 12 game pieces are used, which, according to the ancient rules, are 6 white and 6 black. There are 2 fish pieces, which are placed in the water. The throwing of the dice is done with a jade. The 2 players take turns to throw the dice and move their pieces. When a piece has been moved to a certain place, it is stood up on end and called an owl. Thereupon, it can enter the water and eat a fish, which is also called pulling a fish. Every time a player pulls a fish, he gets 2 tokens. And if he pulls 2 fish in a row, he gets 3 tokens for the second fish. It'd be like getting 5 tokens in one turn, essentially. If a player has already pulled 2 fish but does not win, it is called double pulling a pair of fish. When one player wins 6 tokens, the game is won. So honestly, getting 2 in a row would, be killer. That's the strat. That's the main game. You get your owls and you sync them up so that way they can both pull a fish out at the same time. That's the way to do it. I wish I would have realized that when I was playing the game today, because you can download the game and play a version of it online. And the first game I played, I was still kind of trying to figure out how everything was playing. I mean, I did all the research and I understood like what the game was and some of its history and stuff, but like playing the game definitely helped teach it much more. Another somewhat later source, the Family Instructions Master Yan by Yan Zitui, states that there were 2 variants of Liubo: Greater Bow, which was played with 6 throwing sticks, and Lesser Bow, which was played with 2 dice. The quote for this is, the ancient Greater Bow used 6 sticks, whereas Lesser Bow used 2 dice. Nowadays, there's no one who knows how to play. But in those days, when it was played, it used 1 die and 12 game pieces. It had very little skill and was not worth playing. Despite it being so popular, this guy is just shitting on it. There have been several attempts to reconstruct the rules of the game, most notably by Lian Shengyang, who discusses the game as if it was possibly played on TLV mirrors. Yang theorizes that a player's piece would start on an L-shaped mark and try to move to a V-shaped corner mark depending on the throw of the sticks. Certain throws would allow a player's piece to move into the center and kill the opponent's piece if it was already there. Once in the center, a piece could begin to block the enemy's pieces from taking a square. For each block, one would gain 2 points. One could also attempt to recover one's pieces after they are blocked. It would gain 3 points for doing this. If one failed to win after having blocked 2 men, then the opponent would gain 6 points and win the game. The first player to 6 points would win the game, and then Jean-Louis Cauchon has reconstructed similar rules for playing Liubo as well. So, as you can see, there's a bunch of confusing text here, confusing script. Nobody is quite exactly sure how to play the game, and so there's a bunch of variants here. In 2019, more than 1,000 bamboo slips containing the rules for Liubo have been discovered in the tomb of the Marquis of Haihun. Now, with that, here is what has been reconstructed so far on how to play and what the game was about. And this is kind of like the primary way to play. This is the game that I downloaded and how I played it. Liubo is a game about birds catching fish. Each player controls 6 pieces representing birds. These birds fly around the board in order to reach the center of the square, which represents a pond full of fish. Birds catch fish by crossing over or landing on this pond, and then score points by dropping the fish in the circle, or nest, spaces on the opponent's side of the board. However, you can also score points by capturing your opponent's birds before they reach the nests. Liubo takes between 10 to 45 minutes to play, which is, I did a game in about 10 minutes against myself. I played against myself. And again, the first player to 6 points wins. What's interesting here is the emphasis on the number 6. You get 6 pieces. There are 6 points to win and 6 sticks thrown. So Li in the game means 6, which is, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. It's cool. Yeah, it's good to consider. But anyways, here's the rule. So Liubo requires the board consisting of 4 corners, 4 L and 4 T shapes, and 4 circles. The central area of the board is the river, or sky and earth again. Liubo requires 6 casting sticks. 6 dice can be used. Odd numbers are 3 points, and even numbers count as 2 points. So typically when you throw sticks, if it's facing down, I think it's that's even, and if it's facing up, it's odd. So you typically want to have more odd numbers, but after you roll, players separate the dice into 2 groups and add up points, then subtract 5 to obtain the number of moves on each set. Each set must be used on a piece. So each player selects 6 beads or stones with the color of their choice. All beads start off the board. So all of your pieces start off the board, and then players decide who begins the game by rolling a dice. So whoever gets the higher number wins and goes first. Okay, so in turns, players move their beads counterclockwise. Beads start on the cross arm of an L, and they move to the two sides of a corner. Land on a circle, the arm of an L, and then onto the cross arm of an L, which I know sounds confusing, but essentially it's just hopping around. Imagine it's like hopping around like a tree branch. So that your bird, or like your piece, is jumping around this tree branch, trying to get over so it can start flying over and then head towards the river. And once around the board and you can get into the river, the bead moves onto the cross of the T and then the intersection of the T. So it'll move kind of like you go horizontal, vertical, like putting your piece, like you either sit upright or on its side as you go throughout here. Then the intersection of the T and the river moving around the river. The cross arms of the L are points, 1, 6, 11, and 16. And if a player lands, this is from a website, so it's like a diagram. I'm going to have the diagram up in the video. So if you're watching on the video, you're going to get a little bit more of this. If a player lands on a space, the bead can move across the board to the opposite point. The bead or bird can land on the river and become an owl. Players can only have one owl at a time, but that is disputed. You can have up to two, because again, it wouldn't make sense that you're not able to using two owls to capture a fish in a row with the other rules that are known. So this is another interpretation of it. This is an earlier interpretation, but on this one, if an owl captures another bead, is removed from the game, it cannot restart. If an owl captures another owl, the bead is demoted and must re-enter the game. So it gets a little complicated here with this variant. And because of this, unfortunately, the game has not been completely restored and or understood yet. As far as I can tell, based off the research I did, the rules that are not fully understood or haven't been discovered yet are the exact movement rules and how they work, variations of the board, and what has been determined to be props and what their purpose is. And I like to imagine that these, ancient props and other boards or board variants that they found are just expansions. I mean, obviously, it's just game expansions by, people the family who invented the game. Just to make it more interesting, kind of like Catan Seafarers, Cities, and Knights, which is like Catan on steroids and makes normal Catan seem like it's for babies that still need its mother's milk for sustenance. The last unknown for playing this game is the exact win condition. Now, while the idea of 6 points is what's being used currently, it may not, in fact, be the actual win condition, and it could just be capturing your opponent's owl that's needed to win, or a combination of the 6 points and capturing an opponent's owl. So this has led to many different versions of the game being remade, and why there is not an exact rules book made for the game, despite us finding those 1,000 scrolls of bamboo detailing how to play. But hell, those scrolls could have even been house rules made by the Marquis of Haihun himself, because he just loved the game so much. And so until more evidence is uncovered, we are stuck and just have to play the game to the best of our ability to interpret it. So now that we have a good understanding of what the game is and how to play, let's delve into its history and then some interesting stories about it, or that really came about because of the game. So welcome to our, timeline of the show. Let's start with its origins. The exact origins of Liubo are unclear, but is believed to have been developed in China possibly as early as the 2nd millennium BCE. Archaeological evidence suggests that Liubo was played during the Han Dynasty, which is about 1600 to 1046 BCE, which makes it pretty goddamn old and really close to, again, the 2nd millennium BCE. It is not known when the game originated, although, according to legend, it was invented by Wu Cao, who was a minister to King Ji, the last king of the Xia dynasty, who, according to traditional chronology, reigned 1728 to 1675 BCE. Although there is no archaeological or reliable documentary evidence to support the view that Liubo dates back to the Shang Dynasty. Early Chinese records do indicate that Liubo was already a popular game by the Warring States period of 476 to 221 BCE. For example, the records of the Grand Historian records a speech made during the reign of King Xuan of Qi that claims that the capital city of Linji was so wealthy that its citizens were all able to indulge in activities such as playing musical instruments, cockfighting, classic cockfighting. I feel like that's in every goddamn civilization in ancient history. I don't know why it's illegal, man. Yeah, I mean, it's animal. No, I'm kidding. I know why it's illegal. It's animal abuse. But still, people have been wanting to watch that shit forever. Dog racing, another leisure activity. Playing Liubo and playing kickball. I shit you not. This is from a little history website on the game. The game of Liubo is also described in the mid-3rd century BCE poem, Summons of the Soul, which I'll get into more later. Then with bamboo dice and ivory pieces, the game of Liubo has begun. And in it talks, this is kind of like in the poem, just a brief mention of it. And there's more context to that as well. It's honestly kind of cool. So moving on, in the 1st millennium BCE, the Zhou Dynasty, this is where we get some of the earliest texts that was described as a game of strategy and chance in the Zhou Dynasty. We have the Rites of the Zhou, which is found in the Zuli, which is an ancient Chinese text describing the ritual, social, and political institutions of the Zhou dynasty. The game is mentioned in the context of courtly life, indicating its importance in the social and cultural practices of the time. Also in the Xi Jing, or the Book of Songs, which is another early reference, a collection of ancient Chinese poetry, essentially. That's what it is. While the game isn't explicitly mentioned, some scholars suggest that certain verses alluding to gaming and divination might be indirect references to Liu Bo or similar games. And part of that is because of the way the board is set up, and the markings on a Liu Bo game board is very similar to markings on divination mirrors. So suggesting that the game had more of almost like a religious importance as well. And there are various philosophical texts from the Zhou period, including those related to Confucianism and Taoism, occasionally reference games and strategies and allegories. Some scholars debate whether these could be oblique references to games like Liu Bo, given its popularity and intellectual nature at the time. And again, this game was everywhere. Everyone who was important had Liu Bo. So more than likely, referring to games like that and the fact that it had some spiritual significance as well means it was probably mentioned in some of those texts or referenced. But again, very obliquely. So in Confucian and Taoist literature, particularly during the Han Dynasty, Confucian and Taoist texts often made analogies using board games to illustrate philosophical and ethical points. Liu Bo, being a popular game at the time, might have been one such game used in these analogies as well, or just kind of referenced. So these early references really do provide us a glimpse into how the game was perceived and integrated into the culture of the time. It was not just a leisure activity, but it was interwoven with the social, intellectual, and spiritual life of the period. Now, this is where we get to its peak popularity, which is 206 BCE and 220 CE. So in the Han Dynasty, it reached its peak popularity at around 206. Many tombs from this era, including that of the Marquis of Dai, contained Liu Bo boards, reflecting its significance in Han culture. I mean, this is like ancient Egyptian shit. You die and you bring stuff with you, and they're bringing this game. That's how fun this game was. They wanted to play it in death in paradise. They wanted to make sure that they could, so they brought it with them. It's crazy to me. It was that important. It was that fun. It was not just a game, but also had ritualistic and divinatory aspects of it. Again, the cultural and divinatory aspects of Liu Bo are evidenced in various archaeological finds and historical texts. A couple examples are the divination boards. So a wooden board with divination diagrams was excavated from a late Western Han tomb at Yinwan in Donghai County, Jiangsu. One side of this board features a Liu Bo diagram. suggesting that the game or its board pattern was used for divinatory purposes. The Liubo diagram was filled with terms for sexagenary cycle, from the sexagenary cycle, similar to the turtle diagram on the other side of the board, indicating a connection to divinatory practices. So they're divining. They're trying to commune with the gods, essentially, using it. Also with the TLV mirrors, as mentioned by Yang Sheng, a guy who is essentially trying to bring the game back and trying to describe the rules. The pattern found on Liubo boards is also seen on the Han Dynasty bronze mirrors known as TLV mirrors. One such mirror, dating to the reign of Wang Mang, includes an inscription that states, "Carved with a Liubo board pattern to dispel misfortune," suggesting a ritual or protective use of the Liubo pattern beyond game playing. Which is, it's insane. Could you imagine if, the Christian churches decided to use Monopoly as a way to commune with God? You have to make sure that you get all of Boardwalk, you pass go enough times, and as soon as someone lands on Boardwalk after you put 3 houses on it, you can talk with Jesus. That's essentially what was happening here. As soon as your owl ate enough fishes, or you played this game enough, you can talk with a deity and kind of figure out what the future's going to be like. It's wild to me. So during its peak in the Han Dynasty, Liubo wasn't just this popular game, it was a cultural phenomenon, deeply intertwined with the social, intellectual, and spiritual life of the era. So let's go ahead and keep looking at its prevalence. Okay, so there's a bunch of tombs with this, specifically the Marquis of Dai's tomb, who we've referenced already. The tomb of the Marquis of Dai, it is one of the most famous archaeological discoveries from this era, contained a Liubo board, which really suggests the game was esteemed by the elite, because this guy was connected to everybody. It's super important, and if he had it, everyone was going to have that shit. Okay? This tomb, dating back to around 168 BCE, is a key piece of evidence about the game's popularity. Other tombs. So there's many other Han Dynasty tombs that also contained Liubo boards and pieces. The inclusion of these items indicates that Liubo was not only popular, but also held a deeper significance, perhaps related to beliefs about the afterlife or as a symbol of status and intellect. Kind of if you need to prove that you had money back in the day, after you die, you can make sure that it's, the game board's buried with you, and if you brought it with you and you showed it to God, God would be like, yeah, I know, you're cool. You made enough money in life. Cool, get into heaven. Essentially. Playing Liubo's likely seen as a sign of intellectual and strategic thinking. It was kind of like chess nowadays. There was a prestige to being good at the game and playing it well. It was more than entertainment. It was a reflection of one's mental acuity and sophistication. It's how someone knew you were on the up and up. And it was a common feature in social gatherings among the nobility. It was a way to display one's cultural refinement and engage in friendly competition. The fancier your board was, the more money you had, the more you could show off, I guess, to your other buddies who were also rich back then with the other nobility. So, kind of going back again to the ritualistic and divinatory aspects, these were often associated with Taoist practices. So the layout of the board, with its division to sky, earth, river, might have also had a cosmological significance. There were a lot of historical accounts that suggest it was used for these purposes as well, much like the first Qing. The throw of the dice in Liubo may have been interpreted as revealing the will of the heavens or the natural order of things. Just, that's pretty interesting, pretty cool. At least I thought so. And it's mentioned in various literary works from the Han Dynasty, often used as a metaphor for strategy, fate, or the complexities of life. There are multiple depictions of Liubo that have been found in Han Dynasty art, including paintings and sculptures, which further illustrates its prominence in the culture of that time. Not only that, but there is official recognition for the game from the government. There's evidence that Liubo was recognized and regulated by the government even. So my joke about the game had to halt because they're killing too many people over it, not exactly true. However, the game was so popular They did regulate who could have it, indicating its importance in society and status that it brought. The game may have even been used to teach principles of strategy and management to officials. And during, again, this time, this game was much more popular than other board games that existed, such as Xiangqi, or Chinese chess, and Weiqi, which is Go, which later rose to prominence in subsequent dynasties and overtook Liubo. Unfortunately, that's why we don't have it today. Because those games, fucking Go and chess, or Chinese chess, god damn you. But not only this, the popularity of the game extended beyond its borders of China, influencing board games in neighboring regions and cultures. There's references to the Tibet had something, and during the Three Kingdoms period, there was them, and the Jin Dynasty was pretty much just widely known throughout that whole region. So, however, by this time, the decline of popularity also begins to go. And this was during 581 to 618 CE, which is the time of the Sui and the Tang dynasties. Liubo's popularity really started to wane here, and it was overshadowed by Chinese chess and fucking Go, which I kind of get. I mean, Go is a lot of fun. It's also super complicated, and it's pure strategy. There's, no chance there. You're just using strategy. And I could see why people preferred using that as a means of like intellectual snobbery over the potential chance that a commoner could, just throw perfect sticks the whole game and beat you. Because there is that chance. It's a very slim chance, but there is still a chance that could happen. And just perfectly throwing, so you had the exact right moves to constantly capture, and get 5 points in one turn, and then boop, 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 you can run, get, drop off a fish, get another point and win, which is, that would piss off some people. I could see that. It would definitely piss off a noble. And I actually did at one point. There's a prince who was playing the game and got so mad at one of his priests that wouldn't just like automatically let the prince win, that the prince took the Liu board game, and smashed it over the head of that guy and killed him, which is nuts to me. It's that board game rage. It's existed forever. It happens. So it makes me feel, a little better at times where I kind of got a little miffed at like how a round of Catan went, because I did not throw the dice right, or the dice just, I had it on 6 and 8s, but for some reason the game decided to roll 11s and 3s the whole time, which it's insane to me. The odds for that happening is nuts. Whatever. But the period spanning the 3rd to 6th century CE, encompassing the Three Kingdoms, Jin Dynasty, and the early parts of the Sui and Tang dynasties, marks a significant transitional phase in the history of Liubo. This era is characterized by both the continuation of the game's legacy and the beginnings of its gradual decline in popularity. So, during the Three Kingdoms period, it was still a well-recognized and played game. One of the most notable references during this time is in the historical text Records of the Three Kingdoms, written by Chen Shu. It describes the people of the time engaging in the game, indicating its common presence in daily life. So still very much a big part during that time. The Jin Dynasty, it's referenced in various literary works, historical records. These references suggest that the game was part of cultural and intellectual activity still, enjoyed by scholars and nobles alike, but not so much by the masses. However, again, during the Sui and the Tang, this is where the big shift begins to happen. The cultural landscape of China during this time, it began to be overshadowed by other board games like Chinese chess and Go. The main reason for this was the changing of cultural tastes. The change in imperial dynasties often brought shifts in cultural preferences and tastes. The Sui and Tang dynasties were known for their cultural renaissance and favored other forms of intellectual entertainment. Also, kind of every time a new dynasty or kingdom takes over, they want to try to erase the previous dynasty's, image and cultural grip it had on its people, to hopefully quell uprisings before they happen by getting the people to accept their cultural preferences. So part of that is, Liubo was so popular with these other dynasties, they wanted to make sure that it was kind of not, it's just not there anymore. And they're like, we don't want to remind you of the people that you may have actually liked before, and now you want to kill us. So I'm just going to get rid of things that remind you of that, and the board game was one of those. Also, there's the simplicity and accessibility aspect to the game. So games like Chinese chess and Go, with relatively simpler rules, I feel like Go, it gets pretty goddamn complex, and more straightforward gameplay became more popular. They were easier to learn, and thus more accessible to a broader segment of the population. Unlike Liubo, which was complex and perhaps seen as more esoteric at that point. It's kind of like, that's Grandpa's favorite game. Kind of like, I feel like how people view chess chess is almost it's timeless to me, but I know some people view chess as kind of like an old man's game. You see grandpas playing it. This is pretty much what happened to Liubo here. That and during this time period, we begin to see diminished literary references to the game. References to Liubo in literature and historical records became increasingly scarce. This scarcity is a clear indication of the game's waning popularity. There's the cultural evolution as well. This decline of Liubo also reflects the broader cultural and social evolution taking place in China during these times. And as society evolved, so did its forms of entertainment and intellectual pursuits. And after this, in the 7th century to the 20th century, we get its decline into obscurity, where we lose a bunch of shit. There's a lack of detailed record from the 7th to the 20th centuries. So due to the game's decline, detailed rules and methods of play were just lost, making the game more of a historical curiosity than a living tradition, because nobody cared to play it anymore. So they weren't, saving the rules in the same way and passing it on. And if no one's playing your game, no one's going to have a rule book at that point anymore. And no one's going to, keep making sure like, hey, this is what the standard is, but here's the expansion rule set, or here's how the rules were played here. They're not going to care to mark that because the game's not being played. It doesn't matter. So in the 11th to the 19th century, as China went through several dynastic changes, including the Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, the cultural landscape continued to just change drastically. And the changes further marginalized games like Liubo, which were seen as relics of the past and not important anymore. And by this time, it had almost entirely disappeared from public consciousness. Nobody knew, it was no longer a part of social activities or intellectual pursuits at all by the 11th century. And it was done. Yeah, no one cared. No one cared by 1912. Honestly, by 1644, it was done. So we've had like 400 years of nobody playing the game, and no one's going to know the rules. However, in the 20th century, Liubo started to gain attention again. So primarily through archaeological discoveries, the unearthing of ancient Liubo boards and its pieces and tombs provided valuable insights into the game's design and historical significance. Despite these discoveries, the detailed rules and methods of play remained lost for a while until we found the bamboo scrolls. And even then, it's still, not considered known. The absence of the comprehensive contemporary descriptions or manuals meant that the game's exact mechanics were no longer known. It's transitioned from a popular pastime to a subject of historical and archaeological curiosity. Scholars and historians have begun to examine the game as part of China's rich cultural heritage rather than as a living tradition, because it didn't survive and stayed as a living tradition. And throughout these centuries, Liubo's transition from a widely played game to an obscure historical artifact reflects the dynamic nature of cultural practices and entertainments. It's kind of like an example for most countries' shifts in cultural practices and entertainments. I mean, Romans used to love the Colosseum, and then they did away with that shit because they got all into God. Which was kind of weird, because then they got super into burning pagans. So that bloodlust was still there. They just suppressed it and did like a holier than thou sort of deal, but whatever. And that's kind of what happens here. And that's why these games are so important to history, in my opinion, because they show like what people were interested in, what people like to do. And it kind of gives that aspect of history that isn't talked about as much as I wish it was, is that daily life, what humans would do on their downtime, in their free time. What was the fun and the cool thing to do back then? What was everybody, talking about, and like, what did people like? Because that changes over time. That really, really changes over time, and is what leads to new things being made, or new games to be created, like Twilight Imperium. Probably would have never gotten here without Liubo. Well, who knows, maybe. But that game's hella complex and fucking crazy, and I'm still not good at it. I'm trying to learn how to be better at that game. I need to start chasing after the victory points early in the game, so that way I'm keeping up with the other players and not so focused on making sure other players can't just come in and conquer my territories, because they're probably not worried about doing that. They're probably also more focused on the victory points. Sorry, I know I'm getting off topic. I just played it recently. I really want to get better at it, so that way I feel like I'm more of a competitor and people aren't worried. That I'm not just like essentially someone who's going to help the winner of the game. I don't, when you're that player at the table where like they know you're not that good at the game, so they're going to just kind of like work with you to help them win and make you feel good about it. I hate that. No, I want to be a competitor. But so with the Han Dynasty tombs and discovery of these Liubo boards and insights from artifacts, we've had a lot more efforts at reconstruction for Liubo. And the main efforts from these, artifacts are interpreting the historical sources. There's a lot of historians and scholars that have scoured through these findings to piece together how the game might have been played. This includes interpreting descriptions in ancient literature and examining the layouts of surviving game boards. And due to the absence of the complete set of rules, there have been various reconstructed versions of the game. I showed you the downloaded game on the YouTube video or Patreon video, if you guys are watching on Patreon, which, by the way, if I have provided enough entertainment for you, or provided, just done something of interest to you, please like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps grow the show. And, maybe I can do more of these videos and do them better over time if it gains more support. And hopefully I've done something that piqued your interest and, makes you like the show and this idea that I'm doing. So if not, I understand. You're probably not here. So who cares? There's also been some experimental archaeology that has happened. So some enthusiasts have engaged in it, creating playable Liubo boards and organizing game sessions to understand better how the game might have functioned. So they're playtesting Liubo right now. Lots of playtesting's going on. I feel like the game definitely didn't pass the blind test, where if you just had the game and its pieces out at a random table and two people just came up and started to play it, they if they could play a full game without needing a rule book, then you designed your game well. However, not every game can pass that test, and not every game should pass that test. I feel like there's games that definitely need a good understanding, especially the European, kind of like victory point board games. Those ones, you definitely need rule books, and it makes the games more fun, in my opinion. But part of this cultural revival is due to interest in ancient games. There's been a growing interest in ancient Chinese games, including Liubo, as part of a broader cultural revival in that area. This interest is driven by a desire to understand and reconnect with traditional Chinese culture. It's also educational and cultural programs. This game is sometimes featured in exhibitions, educational programs, and cultural festivals. These events aim to educate the public about ancient Chinese history and culture. And it's a niche hobby. So it remains a niche interest compared to mainstream games, but it has a dedicated following among history enthusiasts and gamers interested in ancient board games. So the evolution from its origins to its modern day rediscovery and reconstruction reflects the broader narrative of this culture and history. While the exact rules from its heyday are still not fully known, the game continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts like me. Liubo serves as a unique window into leisure activities, social structures, and cultural practices of ancient China, providing a tangible link to the past that continues to intrigue and inspire. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at some fables and stories that have come from this game. And then after that, we'll go to the end of the show where I'll recap some info. So stay tuned for some fables and quick stories. Right, so the first fable or story we have from here is the Han Dynasty Emperor and Liubo. This is probably the most famous one. It involves Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, and it is said that he was so engrossed in playing Liubo that he failed to notice a fire breaking out of the palace. The story is often cited to illustrate the game's engrossing nature and sometimes as a cautionary tale about becoming too absorbed in leisure activities. This is because the palace erupted completely in flames and then supposedly died. I did try to find the exact source for this story. It is constantly referenced in a whole bunch of online articles, books, or stuff done by other historians, but I cannot find the exact script. I tried really hard to find it, so I'm sorry that I don't have that. But this is a famous story, and it's more of an oratory story. So again, like an oral tale. I could have retold it, but I feel like that becomes almost too historical revision-y if I did that. Just reimagining how the story was told. So I'm just, that's what happened. So the fables where Liubo serves as a metaphor for life's unpredictability and interplay of skill and chance are the Summons of the Soul. This poem from the mid-3rd century BCE describes the game of Liubo, emphasizing the strategic chance and elements of the game. The poem metaphorically speaks about the game, highlighting the keen competition and strategic thinking involved, which can be seen as reflective of the challenges and unpredictability of life. And then in the Han Dynasty tomb and figurines and artifacts, figurines from that time depict scenes of Liubo being played, often showing players in animated and emotionally charged states. So like angry or like, oh no, like frustrated. It's just so funny. It's just like, that's how good the game was. It evoked emotion out of people, which is, I feel like, a good indicator of like what a good board game does. These depictions can be interpreted as metaphors for the competitive spirit and the highs and lows of life. The game's presence in these artifacts suggests that it was more than just entertainment. It was part of the cultural fabric of the time. It's just more evidence that I'm providing here for everything that I said, in case people are like, no, it didn't. Like, I don't know. There's all this that kind of points to the fact that it did. Another famous archaeological discovery related to this, and again, just another story about this, is the grave of Marquis Yi of Zhang. Among the many treasures found at the tomb was a beautifully crafted Liubo board, indicating how popular and the status that this game was among the nobility. Also, the thousands of bamboo scrolls laid out the rules for the game as well. There's more bamboo scrolls, so much of it still needs to be examined and understood if the game can ever be fully realized. But, again, those scrolls can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, and it could even just be completely wrong. My family, we love house rules. We like to play this card game called Hand and Foot, and there are around 4 variations for how you're supposed to play it just within my family alone. Now imagine 1,000 years, for some reason, the game of Hand and Foot is lost to time, and eventually they come across my family's remains, and by some chance, one of the things that survived the passage of time was the plastic box that my family has, containing the necessary amount of playing cards, and the notepad where we kept track of the scores and rules, plus the variants of the rules. Now 1,000 years have passed, so the lingo we use to write down rules probably changed quite a bit, and we have the 4 variants we play when we were at my aunt's house, my uncle's house, my great aunt's house, and my grandpa's house. They would have no fucking idea which version was accurate, and if all or only some of those rules should apply to the game. And that's essentially what happened here with those scrolls. And I provided this example for anyone who at this point in the show is wondering how the fuck they haven't remade the game yet if they found a laundry list of rules detailing how to play the game. And that example is pretty much why, because, again, it could have just been a bunch of different rules that, aren't the actual mainstream rules for the game. Now, for more stories and kind of like literary references, we have the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra. The Chinese version of this important Buddhist scripture mentions several games, including Liubo. This reference suggests that Liubo was known and perhaps even played in regions beyond China, possibly as far as India. The inclusion of Liubo in such a significant religious text indicates its cultural reach and the esteem in which it was held. Also, the Old Book of Tang mentions that the Tibetans enjoyed playing both the game of Go and Liubo. Although this is not a literary work in the traditional sense, it provides historical evidence of the game's popularity beyond the Han Dynasty and its spread to neighboring cultures, like the Tibetans. There's also these supernatural mythological associations. And this is kind of the main fables and stories here. So some examples of this fables or myths about the game are the Wang Qiao and Qi Song in Huannanzi and Chu Qi. These two immortals are mentioned together in ancient texts like the Huannanzi and the Chu Qi anthology. The Chu Qi features a poem titled The Far Off Journey, which prominently includes Wang Qiao and Qi Song. These texts, while not explicitly depicting them playing Liubo, associate them with spiritual practices and transcendental experiences, which could be symbolically linked to the game's deeper, more spiritual meanings. Again, this reference is a little oblique, but I feel like it makes sense here because the game has been found, it's the board shape and the designs on the board have been found in divinatory practices and spiritual practices that relate to this story here. Engravings on Eastern Han stone coffins from Sichuan show scenes of fairy-like figures playing Liubo. These depictions, found exclusively in the Sichuan region, suggest a mythological or supernatural context for the game. The figures, sometimes with wings and extraordinary features, are shown engaged in the game, indicating that Liubo was symbolically significant and possibly linked to mythical stories or cultural beliefs of that time. And according to a legend mentioned by the historian Sima Qian, Shang Dynasty emperor used Liubo pieces shaped like gods and declared victory over the gods themselves after his subjects let him win. The story, the more legendary than mythological, illustrates how it was intertwined with this idea of the divine or supernatural in ancient Chinese culture. And this is also the emperor that killed the guy by smashing the board over his head because he wouldn't let him win. He was a sore loser, So in some historical narratives, Liubo matches are used allegorically to reflect strategies and outcomes of real-life battles or political maneuvers, symbolizing the intricate dance of strategy and chance in both the game and in real life as well. These stories and anecdotes, whether rooted in history or legend, showcase the game's multifaceted role in this culture. It was more than just a game, it was a symbol of fate, intellect, and sometimes a mystical tool. These tales contribute overall to the complete understanding of the game's significance in this grand tapestry of history and mythology. But with that all said, that brings us to the end of today's historical quarrel. All right, everyone, welcome to the end of today's episode. I really liked it. I don't know. I thought that was really cool. I love board games. I love history. So kind of combining the two today was just a lot of fun. Let me know what you thought. I guess I should probably do a brief recap. So my takeaways from this is one, how cool it was that these civilizations like these have always had board games, essentially. They've always had these games, these just methods of entertainment that we still do to this day in our modern era. I mean, I'm like, yes, video games are all the rage, but board games are still, I feel like everyone my age, and honestly, everyone older than me has definitely played a board game in their time here on this planet we call Earth. And it's cool to think that humans have been doing this for fucking thousands of years at this point. It's nuts to me. And it makes me happy that one of my favorite pastimes is this rooted in history and important, almost in a way, to human civilization. And I say important in the same way that I would say, like plays or poetry is important. It's a form of art. It's a form of human expression, and it's definitely important to understanding a lot of aspects of human society and cultures. And so to understand ancient Chinese culture, they put a lot of emphasis on intellectualism and being perceived as smart and strategic and good at these different important things that are important for real life, like warfare and like these other things, like again, like strategy or like political maneuvering. It's just cool, like how these games can be very symbolic of that, or just kind of represent what everyone wanted to be perceived as, at least. And again, playing the board game was also really cool. I was really happy to find that they had essentially made a free version of the game that you can download online. Speaking of which, if you want to play it, go to projects.etc.cmu.edu /Liubo lab, Liubo-lab/Liubo. And then you can click on the top left, like it looks like what the board game would look like. And you click on that and then go to the download the game. There's no viruses from it, as far as I can tell. And I did a cybersecurity course. I did check through the files, viewed it. They just used, what was it? They used Unity for a lot of like moving the game and like having stuff show up in the game, which was neat. But yeah, there's nothing in there crazy that's gonna like wreck your computer. And it's also .edu, which I know isn't always safe, but still, it's a little safer than some other, .coms. But anyways, what'd you guys think? Did you have fun in this episode? Something you don't prefer? Which, I mean, if you prefer my normal content, my regular stuff, I will probably go back to doing, normal episodes. But bear with me. I kind of want to try this out. I want to see how this works. I don't know. Maybe I will just start a separate show and just like record a bunch of episodes and like do them separately from this, especially depending on the reception to today's episode. If you like it, please let me know. Please let me know that I should continue this, or if you want me to do it in something, like you want me to do this, but you just don't want it on this main show, that would be good to know as well. It would really help me understand what I need to do as a creator, how I can improve, I guess, your guys' overall enjoyment and everything too. The idea for the board game show is going to be a much shorter, like 10-minute, kind of go over what the game is, go over the rules, and then kind of like review it. Say like, this game gets like a 3 out of 10 because, just not enough dice rolling. Or, just kind of do like a review show for ancient board games, instead of like deep diving into its history and everything like I do on this show, and putting in a bunch of research and trying to and horribly pronouncing Chinese words. And I'm sorry if I offended any listeners who are Chinese and speak Mandarin, or you speak Cantonese, or just other variants of the Chinese language. I am not a speaker. Unfortunately, the only other language I really know is Spanish and like a tiny bit of French. So Latin-based languages. I don't know, any, I guess like Asiatic languages. So that's, I'm sorry. Please, if you have some advice, or like if I was trying to like create a pronunciation guide for this, and I just did not have enough time. So it is what it is. And I apologize if I offended you. That was not my intent. My intent was just to try and pronounce the names and then move forward with the show. I'm not just trying to pronounce shit horribly just to make fun of it. Not at all. No one wants to do that. Well, some people do, but I'm not that. I'm not those some people. So I apologize if I'm a bit scatterbrained today. I took my meds earlier in the day, so I feel like my ADHD has just been kicking my ass, which is wild. I know I've probably lost most of the people who were listening to the show by now, especially with my rambling that I'm doing here at the end. But this is my show, and so if I'm going to talk here at the end, I gave you the information at the beginning. You got through it. This is the part where I allow myself to ramble now, because I understand why people are like, hey, just get to the show. Just, get to it and do it. And that's why I've been doing that lately. It's just kind of getting to the point, and then here at the end, doing my whole spiel, talking, trying to connect. I really want to connect with listeners, and so people who listen to the whole show and I get to connect with you, that's great. I love doing that. It's a really cool aspect of community building, and I think community is very important. Finding your community and finding your people that you can talk with and enjoy your passions with is awesome. And I really want to do that through this medium. And honestly, I think my passion of board games and history is honestly almost to the same level with each other. And that's why I have a history show and why I really want to do an ancient board game show, or hell, maybe even just a regular board game show too. I really love board games. I think they're fun. I'm building my own board game too, so that's how much I love it. I'm making my own board game so I can play more board games, just so I can play something just extra and more fun for me and for people I know. Who knows though? Maybe if the game does well enough with the testing that I do, I might do a Kickstarter for it, and if enough people like it, then I can launch it, which would be cool. And people can buy a board game that I made. But if not, it happens. I made a board game for me. I get to play it. So, man, I'm rambling a lot. I know I'm rambling a lot. I'm just, man, I had a lot of fun this episode. I'm not gonna lie. I really did enjoy doing this. It was cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope my love for it came out. Again, sorry if it was kind of all over the place. I'm still trying to figure out this new format for board games and history and combining the two. So just bear with me. I will get it eventually. I promise. I'm going to do my best to make it great. But other than that, I'm curious to hear if there's other board games that you guys want to learn about too. So if you want to, learn about the Royal Game of Ur, I mean, there's a ton of videos on that one already. What's the historian's name? The guy who basically learned the Mesopotamia, the Babylonian language. Oh my gosh. Or no, not the Babylonian. This is gonna bug me. Man. But he essentially just was able to interpret the language that I don't know how to describe it. It was essentially a dead language, and this guy came in, studied it so much that he was able to interpret it and get the exact almost right results, and we're able to find recipes, ancient recipes written. Oh my, what language was it called? It was it's gonna kill me. I know this. I watched the video. Oh, my hack. Whatever. I can't think of it right now. My brain's too fried. It's too done. But yeah, if you want to learn some more about that or see my take on that, my take on the game, or my thoughts on it, and leave a comment with the game, or shoot me a message. I don't care how you shoot me a message. It doesn't matter. Oh, also, nobody won, unfortunately. I didn't really get an email from anyone for the challenge for that, so I guess nobody wanted to play it. So if that's the case, I got some likes on it, on the video, so if you, I guess if people just like it, I think I'll just, instead of like doing like a guessing game, I'll just, the story was based on Metal Gear. So I guess next Christmas I'll just do the sequel. I'll do, Metal Gear Solid, I should say. So I'll do the Sons of Liberty next. And just turn it into like a Christmas story, Dr. Seuss-esque story. Like the whole narrative of that. I'll do that once a year. So instead of playing a game, that's what we'll do, since no one, and that's fine. No one has to. That's just, that's what happened. So that's what I'll do. And instead of making up names, I'll just say, Snake. Snakes craftily snuck into the lair with glee. But that's why there's the whole like clones with Santa bit and everything too, because it's just, I was doing I was trying to make it obvious. But let's see, other than that, I don't really have much else here. So you guys have a good one. I'll, I guess, see you guys next week. You'll see what episode I'm doing next week. Maybe another board game, may not be. Depends on which script I like more. If I'm going to be continuing more with like the war stuff that I have planned, or if I want to do more board game stuff, because I like it. Also depends on the reception to this. I have stuff written out, so either one. I just need to record it, which I'll do sometime. But yeah, you guys have a good one. Be safe. Love y'all. Goodbye.